In a previous video, How to Live in Love, I spoke about the idea of that to live in love is to live in life. And in order to do that, you need to learn to know yourself. And in order to achieve the self-knowledge, we need to just backtrack a little bit and understand what you actually are, what makes you you. Inside your head, in your skull, there is a huge network of synaptic connections which collectively is known as a neural network. And this neural network is the thing that makes you you. And it is also the thing that makes you absolutely unique. You see, this neural network is made up of all the things that you've ever learned in your entire life. Every time you learn something, something happens in your brain, in the biology of your brain. Your brain physically makes a synaptic connection, it'll bzzzt. And these synaptic connections, if they're reinforced, if you do the same thing over and over again, more and more synaptic connections are made that reinforce this particular learning, and this then turns into a synaptic pathway. And all of these synaptic connections, of which there are trillions, turn into this neural network in which there are pathways which are very big and powerful, lots of information goes through them, and then there are pathways that you might never use and they get overgrown and they fall into disuse and the neural connections die off. And so your neural network is constantly growing, constantly changing, and constantly recreating what you are. You are not permanently one thing. Quite often people say, I am what I am, and people should just take me for what I am and just love me for what I am. But what are you exactly? This is what brain training addresses. It's a fundamental discovery of what you are. And why is this important? Well, because cognitive neuroscientists have discovered that most of our learning, and the statistics show we're talking in the 90% of our learning, is unconscious learning. We are not aware that we are learning. We have no idea why we are learning what we are learning, but our brain is quite happily making these synaptic connections without us being even aware of it. So the question is, if you are not aware of what you are learning, and this learning is making up the neural network which makes you you, how can you be aware of what you are? With brain training, you can get a little closer to knowing this. And of course, in this concept of falling in love and finding your significant other, this is quite important. You know, people quite often ask me, why do I fall in love with a certain person? It's an ineffable thing. You cannot know why you fall in love with somebody until you know who you are, what triggers your switches. And this is where brain training certainly comes in, because it allows you, with practice, to actually go into this thing that I call the mindfield, to journey into this mindfield and rediscover these unconscious learnt moments that are making you behave in a certain way. To allow you to begin to control just a little bit the people that you do fall in love with. I mean, you might have a track record of falling in love with inappropriate partners. And afterwards, after going through the heartbreak or the anger or whatever it is that this love match results in, you might ask yourself, why do I keep doing that? with brain training, with visualization, with learning to focus, learning to still your reactive mind, you can start answering those questions. And then, when you become aware that this falling in love moment is going to happen again, this moment in which your base emotions, in which your procreational urges take over the intellectual part of your brain, and your hormones start surging and you start feeling this blissful feeling of falling in love, you might just be able to rein in this whole urge to just move into this direction a tiny bit. Women fall in love with a nose. They fall in love with a scent of pheromones that tells their instinctive brain that this person's pheromones, his immune system, is a good match to mine to make healthy babies. And men fall in love visually with the eyes. They can see the shape of the face, the shape of the body, that will tell them that this person is a good person for me to match up with in order to create healthy babies. And so with this flood of hormones that goes through our system, these endorphins and norepinephrines and adrenalines and whatnot, and switching off the intellectual part of the brain, we open ourselves up to this person, which is of course vital for procreation to take place. And we allow this person to come into our intimate sphere, and we mesh with this person. And if all goes as nature planned, we will create a baby together. At which point a whole new set of hormones will flood our system in order to ensure that we stay together. But because of progress, technology, insemination doesn't necessarily take place. We have made sure of that. And so the brain slowly but surely turns off this flood of hormones. And we slowly but surely close off from this person. And then when the brain is closed off the hormones, turned off the hormones, our intellect turns back on, and we look at this other person and we say, why did I fall in love with this person? I mean, what was I thinking? The relationship breaks off. One person might be heartbroken, the other person not. Most often, most people just walk away and say, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't actually quite remember why I fell in love with this person. It's because the part of your brain that thinks and remembers and does all of this stuff was turned off. You didn't fall in love with your brain, with your intellect. You fell in love with your heart. You fell in love with your base emotional responses. With brain training, you can start to regulate that. And you start to recognize that falling in love with your intellect is vital to a healthy, loving relationship. Because it is in your head, in your intellect, that intimacy arises. It is here in your intellect that you open up your mind. And your mind, as I just said, is where you are, the truth of what you are. All of these things that you've learned throughout your entire life that have created these synaptic connections that have turned into a neural network that makes you uniquely what you are, is accessed by your mind, by your intellect. Not by your heart, not by your procreational urges. And so when you train your brain, you learn to do a couple of really important things. You learn what makes you you. You discover what switches, what trigger certain behaviors in you. And if they are not beneficial, you learn to control them. You learn to recognize them before your primitive hormones take over and wash you away out to this sea of passion in which you might find yourself floundering yet again. Washing up on the shore with your hair awry and your bikini top floating off into the tide. So brain training brings control into your love life. Now, often people say, oh, but I don't want control. Yes, you do. A more advanced brain training is learning the art of making love. And then you learn, if you really want to reach the heights of intimacy, the heights of bliss and the heights of passion that you dream of, it all depends on control. And in the next video that follows here, I will be demonstrating and teaching you a small breathing exercise, because first and foremost, control starts by controlling your breath. When you control your breath, you start to slowly control your base emotions, your base reactions. And that's vitally important in all aspects of building out your relationships, not just your love relationships, but your relationship with yourself, with discovering who you are, and all your social interactions that you might go through during the day. So I hope you'll stick around for the next video, in which I will show you a very simple breathing technique that you can do anywhere, practice often, and start controlling what your neural network is doing.